My name is Merrill Dubrow, CEO of MARC Research. I'm a 35-year veteran of the research and insights community and the host of our podcast, On the Mark. On the Mark is focusing on executives and thought leaders in the world sharing their insights, strategies, and personal experiences. I promise this podcast will be filled with tough, pointed questions with real, insightful, and emotional answers. Today's guest is my buddy and former professional baseball player, Homer Bush. Homer, welcome to On the Mark podcast.
Thanks for having me, Doobie.
All right. Bushy, let's just get into it. I still remember the first time we met, which was probably 13 or 14 years ago, and you were describing to me East St. Louis. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about that and that experience and how you came up and were able to get to the other side of that?
You know, I tell you what, East St. Louis, man, when you're in it, you don't realize what's taking place, right? I mean, of course, you know it's tough. You notice the gangs and the crime, you know the high crime. So, but when I was growing up, like, man, I didn't understand the inner city the way I do now as an adult. As an adult now, and I reflect back on it, man, it was wasn't a whole lot of job opportunities. A lot of the plants, manufacturing plants, had closed up and moved north, and so it made the city undesirable in many ways. As a young man who was playing sports, I was able to use sports as a way to get out of the city of East St. Louis, and that kept me away from the gangs and the drugs.
So there you are, back in the day, East St. Louis. You're the it guy, Bushy, right? I mean, you're like the big baseball star, right? You're the big baseball star. You're the stud football player, right? I mean, you know, when you're talking about the East St. Louis Flyers, when you talk about the East St. Louis Flyers, you're talking about one of the greatest teams in the history of football, high school football, and you still hold state records, right?
Yeah. No, the most amazing thing about that whole experience was this. You know, as you know, we had some unbelievable athletes to come out of there. So my time came during my senior year. We had a young man that broke the receiving-wise, broke the state records as a junior. So I had an opportunity to see his experience firsthand. And then when I became a senior, I worked hard and I was able to break his records. And on the baseball front, I was kind of known as a halfway decent player most of my career. But there again, I still had to buy my time. And my senior year, I got my opportunity and I made the best of it.
So what was my sense is you were recruited from big-time college and big-time baseball, universities. How did you decide? Did you flip a coin and say, okay, baseball heads, tails, football? How'd you decide?
Well, Dewey, I wasn't much for contact, so football really wasn't an option for me.
All right. Okay.
So and when it came, that was going to be my path out initially. So it was easy. The decision was easy for me. My parents didn't have a ton of money for me to go out to the East Coast or West Coast. So it was going to be definitely within driving distance. And it was going to be between Illinois and Mizzou football. And I chose Mizzou at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine having the decisions that the young players are having to make today, where they can go from one coast to the next, and they're having, 20 and 30 big-time D1 programs chasing after them. So it was a lot easier decision to make back in the day.
So take me through it. I remember here I am, an 18-year-old, thought that I was really, really cool in Massachusetts, in Framingham, Massachusetts, and getting ready to go to college. And you're 18 at the time, and San Diego gives you a call and says, hey, Homer, we just drafted you in the 7th round. Do you remember where you were at that time?
I was at my sister's. I was visiting with my sister in city East St. Louis when I got the call. Man, I tell you what, I was so naive about the process. I thought I was going to San Diego right away. And they was like, oh, hold up. No, you got to go through the minor league. So I really didn't even understand the whole minor league process. But I knew I wanted to play baseball, so I figured, hey, it'll give me some cash, I'll go play. And I'll be honest with you, I thought they were grooming me to be their next second baseman, not that I was actually going to compete with guys from all over the country and even in the Dominican Republic. So being naive really helped me as a young man.
So, that's an interesting story. So you're 18, you've been told your whole life that you're this star, which you are. listen, I've seen you, and you've got that $1 million smile. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I appreciate it.
And here you are in San Diego, and you got to compete because you spent, if I'm not mistaken, Bushy, you spent 6 years in the minors. That had to be hard. How did you get to the other side of that?
You know, it was hard. Definitely one of the most difficult things I've ever done in the sports was navigating my way through the minor leagues, considering I was going to a different state, different city every season. But the one thing that I always gravitate to that was extremely important in that process for me was that I was able to keep moving up a level each year. So my career never really got stagnant in the minor leagues, and so I was always positive about the challenge that was coming ahead. I can only imagine for the players that get stagnant at a certain level for 2 or 3 years, you know, that would probably want them to think about doing something different. But for me, I don't know. I just kept getting better. You know, I was always coachable, good teammate, and I truly loved the game. And so for me, I think all that played into my success.
Well, you know, it's funny because, you know, born and raised in Massachusetts, you know, it's instilled in my blood to hate everything about the Yankees, right?
Sure.
And everybody associated with it. Was it the same? So there you are in 1998. You're playing for the Yankees, the freaking New York Yankees, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, and I have a lot of debates. You and I have gone back and forth many a time. And I have many debates because I believe that the New York Yankees 1998 team, without question, is the best one maybe in the history of the game, right? I mean, you steamrolled in the regular season. You won 114 games, which I think was a record at the time. You then went something like 11-2 in the playoffs. You swept San Diego in the World Series. I mean, you just punished teams, right? Do you agree? Was that the best team ever in the history of the game, do you think?
Of course, I'm going to be a little biased, right, and say yes. But, man, a couple things stick out. One, like, man, you don't really understand it at that time. You're just grinding. You're just hoping to get at bats. But you're noticing that, man, we're a really good team. So as you can imagine, we get in 4 months into the season. I mean, it was just amazing how things just kept getting better and better and better. But see, the interesting thing about my position on the team was that, man, go down that roster. I was the only rookie to start the season that year and also end in the World Series. So I never got sent down, never was traded. And that was because they always had, I filled a void for them. Like, Chili Davis, Darryl Strawberry, Tim Raines, those guys were past their prime, so they had knee issues. So they were using me to come off the bench, then finding ways to get me starts by putting, stepping in for Jeter a day, relieving Knobloch, giving Brocious a day. So it just worked out for me where I found myself in this amazing situation only because I served a purpose. Right? Like, man, I didn't bang my way onto the team. I wasn't really the next up and coming young player. But what happened was I went in, I showed some value, and Joe Torre would always say, like, he kept saying, hey, I'm gonna get you some time. Just be patient with me, but be ready to go when I need you. So, I mean, I had no pressure really, and all I wanted to do, like I tell my son this all the time. That year, all I wanted to do was just run fast, play hard, stay out of trouble, and look what I found myself accomplishing along with everybody else.
You know, it's interesting because looking back in your career, if I'm not mistaken, Bushy, you played with Girardi that year too, didn't you?
Sure did, yeah,
Yeah, so think about what I'm about to ask next, which is you arguably, again, as much as this irritates me to say it, I'm a big fan of Joe Torre. I think he was good for the city of New York. I think he was a really solid manager, and I think he's doing some cool things with baseball right now. But you played for Joe Torre, who was there for a very long time, and you played with Joe Girardi, who then was a manager. When you were playing with Girardi, did you see managerial qualities?
You know what? No, not really. But one thing I can say about Joe Girardi was that everyone always respected his intelligence for the game of baseball. I wouldn't say, people were saying he was going to be a manager, but I know they respect his opinion. He was really good at calling games. And, man, as luck would have it, remember a few years back when they were hiring all these managers that were former catchers?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Man, that played right into his transition into the managerial role because, he was a winner. He caught a perfect game. He was always considered to be an intelligent young man. So, it was just fitting for, this turned out to be his the career that he's in now.
That's right. I think he caught David Cohn's perfect game, didn't he?
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't, I have a fair amount of contacts everywhere, and I got to give you some bad news, Bushy, because I've read the report that's coming out on Friday.
Uh-huh.
And in 1999, the Toronto Blue Jays were stealing signs as well.
Well, they didn't give it to me.
Well, I don't know, Bushy. That was your best year, dude. You hit 320 that year with Toronto. And rumor has it they were stealing signs. No, I'm kidding. But here, I do want to get to something really that really bothers me. Now, I will admit that I heard this stuff about Houston for weeks. I didn't know how deep it went. And it's disappointing to know that Hinch was involved, the GM was involved, Alex Cora was involved, Beltran. I'm glad that Houston acted swiftly and got rid of both A.J. Hinch and the general manager. I got to tell you something. I don't think Cora survives, and I think the Red Sox should make a move if this stuff is true. As a former player, are you pissed off that the stealing signs went to this level? What are your thoughts?
Pissed off would be a little strong, but what I can say is this. When someone's stealing signs at second base and they're trying to relay it to the hitter right before the pitch, that's one thing. But when you get into technology and the manner in which they were doing it,
right.
It gave the batter such a huge advantage over the pitcher. So in that sense, I don't, care for it much. But, been in the corporate world and have owned a company before, the top leaders have to go when things don't go right. Somebody's got to be held responsible. So the fact that, some jobs were lost and some careers are tarnished and potentially going to end behind this, I think it was needed, because if we're going to stop it from happening down the road, these extreme measures had to take place for sure.
So I've got superpowers, as you know, and I just made you commissioner. Give me 3 changes that you would make, Bushy.
Okay.
You're now the commissioner. You're the king. Everything you say goes. What 3 changes would you instill in Major League Baseball?
Whew, man. Okay. So for me, I would go to the electronic strike zone.
Okay.
I believe all the things that's going on in baseball now, umpires are getting hit pretty hard because they've pretty much taken care of all the other issues. The other thing for me is I would allow for players to come up and down frequently, a lot more often, because there's so many young players that's trying to play the game to make it to the major leagues but don't get an opportunity because of roster restrictions. I would say the third one would be I would have it where you couldn't manage no more than 4, maybe 5 years before another manager got an opportunity to manage. Because I think more people need to get an opportunity, enjoy Major League Baseball at that level, because I promise you, I've been there. From players to managers, we were not the best and we were not the brightest. There are far more people that can play at that level, manage at that level, coach at that level that never gets an opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very, very interesting for sure. I like the 5 years. I hadn't thought of that. One of the things that I would do, I would make the salary, I would make a third of it deferred so nobody goes broke, right? So you're making that kind of coin. I don't want to read about somebody being homeless under a bridge. I don't want to read about somebody who, commits suicide or does something because they have no money. I don't remember if it's Bobby Bonilla, but he signed a deal with the Mets, and I can't remember if it's every February, but he gets a check. He gets like $1 million every year for like 30 or 40 years, and that's what I would have done for sure if I was in charge of Major League Baseball.
Well, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you remember, I deferred
Yeah.
the money with Toronto.
No,
yeah,
I do.
Yeah, so no,
I do.
I totally agree with
No,
you
you
on
did.
that. But that,
No, and in fact, I remember you telling me that, and I even said to you, here you are, a 23, 25-year-old kid. How were you smart enough to do that? Because most of the people, most of your contemporaries didn't do it. They all wanted the money now.
part of the problem is, the agents and financial advisors saying, hey, that's not the true value of that dollar. If you have to wait to get it 10 years down the road at 2-3%, you're not keeping up with inflation. See, this is everything I want to talk about on 30 for 30 was like, hey, how the deferred comp helped me. And, it allowed me to get out of the game. It got me an understanding to transition from a multi-million-dollar lifestyle into, a lesser lifestyle. But at the same time, I'm able to get a second career, work on how, a monthly budget should really look on a normal basis, as opposed to when you're getting high six and low seven figures annually. So I think deferred comp is the best thing that could happen in baseball, but I don't think it never happened because agents want the players to get their monies up front.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. How good of athlete is Homer Jr.?
Man, I tell you what, pretty sure I got dad goggles, but man, he's twice the athlete that I was at this time in my life. And he's 6'2", 190. Man, he's running 6'4", 60.
And he's cut, right?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, man. He's an awesome kid too.
You know what? I've spent enough time around him. He definitely is a good kid. Hey, talk a little bit about, there's so many unwritten rules about baseball, and you and I have tussled back and forth with, hey, you can't talk about a no-hitter, and you can't bunt when there's a no-hitter, and don't steal when you're up 10 runs and all this crap. And oh, by the way, when you get plunked, don't rub it. Don't show any emotion. Be a tough guy, right?
Right.
And I know you got hit a bunch of times, dude. You got hit, probably 20, 25 times in the show. Which is the one, and where did you get hit where it hurt the most? Where you just were like, if 50,000 people weren't looking at me, I'd be in tears right now. And you didn't even flinch.
Man, you're going to make me relive this moment, huh? So,
yeah, exactly.
I'm facing one of your buddies, Roger Clemens. By the way, we were traded for one another. Like, I went to Toronto and he went to New York. And the first time I faced him after the trade, man, I went 3-2 in 2 at-bats. And I ground out both times, but the third time I came up, man, he hit me in the ribs because I guess I was making him waste too many pitches. And so, man, I remember that when the stitching was imprinted on my in my rib cage area. And I just remember going to first base and, man, like you say, with kind of like these tears, these watered eyes. And I remember Tino Martinez saying, "Ooh, man, that looked like it hurt." And I was like, "Yeah, it did." So that's one of my most memorable ones. But Pedro almost took my head off too. It's something about these Red Sox guys hitting me.
Well, remember, it's the rivalry. It's, hey, listen, I still have fond memories of Veritek picking up and kind of body slamming A-Rod. Look, they were instilled to hate each other. And I think, I don't like the throwing at their heads, but I like I love the rivalry. I think baseball is better, Bushy, when the Red Sox and Yankees are going at each other. I mean, look, I don't want to see Pedro Martinez take Don Zimmer, rest in peace, and throw him to the ground. I don't want to see that, but right. I want to see hardcore baseball on the field. That's what I think everybody wants to see,
Sure, I agree.
So fill me in. Fill in the listeners. What are you doing these days?
Man, I tell you what, I'm doing a little business development. I'm also feeding my baseball passion by doing stuff for MLB and Toronto Blue Jays and New York Yankees throughout the course of the season. Still heavily involved in, trying to help young ball players fulfill their dreams of playing either in college or at the major league level through some of Major League Baseball's really cool camps and clinics they do to try to equal out the balance of the difference in how much it costs to play nowadays at these showcases and these tournament style baseball. So I'm able to do that for, most of the year. And man, just trying to help my son get to where he ultimately wants to go in the game as well. So my days are filled with baseball and out trying to close deals.
That's great, Bushy. All right, we're going to end with this. What's your favorite memory in the show?
Man, I want to go with my first home run in the old Yankee Stadium.
Tell me it wasn't off the Red Sox, please.
It was not. It was a five-baller Steve Sparks that threw the knuckleball.
Yeah, Steve threw like 60 miles an hour, dude. I could hit Steve. Come on. That's what you're going with? Was it a fastball or knuckleball?
Well, it was a 2-0 fastball, but what made it special was that, back then you didn't have a ton of media outlets, so that was playing games, and it was on ESPN. My family got to see it. Everybody back home in East St. Louis was happy for the old boy. So that definitely is one of my most fondest memories in the game of baseball.
Oh, that's great. Thanks again for listening to Homer Bush, who played professional baseball for the New York Yankees, Toronto Blue Jays, and Florida Marlins. You've been listening to On the Mark podcast. Homer, great job.
Hey, thanks for having me, Merrill.